while we don't always see the immediate effect of all of our hard work, all that we're pouring into everybody else, that it's building and it's building. And last night was a sleepless night, just processing everything and then reflecting on, how many people out there in the world are pursuing their passion and their purpose and trying to put their dent in the universe, and then they give up too soon.
Oh man, you cracked me up. So I saw the new clip that you used the old clip for the video
of our podcast.
Of the podcast. So I was listening to it, and I was like, man, this is really good stuff. And he cracked me up so you cut the end of it yeah, if you ask anybody who works for me, they will say my organizational skills suck, and it ends. And I was like, my wife was like, okay, that's one way to do it. I was like, holy shit. And then because the music, the tone that it goes, dong. I was like, all right, Sean.
It's a hook. It gotta draw them in.
They were like, man, I hope I'm not looking for a job right now. Really? Your organization skills suck? Okay. Here's a video. It literally says you said that. Because they won't hear anything else. They'll miss the whole other 45 seconds.
They need to go watch the full episode to see what's up.
Entire episode. But but getting back to your session yesterday, though, it was like I said, it was the immediate grab. That, first of all, there's a lot of speakers that start off with good morning. My name is Sean Barnes, and I'm with WSS Solutions, and blah, 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 and I want to thank blah, blah, blah for inviting me. And you have that whole storytelling, which I was reading a couple of white papers that talk about some of the best TED Talks, and they say that the best TED Talks engage with a story.
Okay. And
I love how within a minute of your spiel, you start off with the personal story.
Yeah.
And it really just I was, even though we've talked and we've interacted and I know a bit about you, it was almost as if I was meeting you for the first time.
Okay.
And it pulled me in, and I could only imagine those folks in the audience that know nothing about what you do and the work you do. I could only imagine how they were sucked into the Sean Barnes story. I thought that was great.
I appreciate that. Yeah, this one was a big one for me, and I've been practicing and rehearsing and thinking through, okay, what topics do I go to? How deep do I go into them? Because you obviously saw it was a very emotionally taxing speech.
I saw that.
For me, and I'm a bit of an empath, and so the rest of the day continued to be taxing for me, because afterwards, all of the people that came up to me just talking about how much the story resonated and how deeply appreciative, and I could see the tears in their eyes, and with my family being there, my mom, my brother.
That's right, your mother was there. She was front row.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah.
And I had to tell my mom and my brother beforehand. I said, look, I will probably not be able to make eye contact with you through parts of this story. So and she's like, okay, well, thank you for letting me know. And I told my brother, and my brother didn't know anything about the speech. And so it was, I know there were points whenever he was tearing up during the speech, because obviously talking about my dad and just everything that happened there. And because he was Lamar's son.
Okay.
And it just, and then last night, all of the messages, it's just been overwhelming. So there's another element that I didn't anticipate. Yes, I knew the speech itself was going to drain me. I didn't anticipate all of the conversations afterwards and just the emotional, I'm going to say drain, and just exchange of energy. And then, I'm going to be just fully transparent. For this past year of starting my business full time, man, it has crushed me. It has been very challenging because, at the beginning of the year, we staffed up for work that our customers had committed to, and they backed out. And I had hired these employees, and I wasn't going to just let them go. So it has been scrap claw trying to get more work for us. And in doing that, and having the podcast and building my brand and getting out there, and it has been extremely taxing throughout the year for me. And there are times whenever I would start to get down on myself and question, my God, like, am I making the impact that I thought, or like that I want to make in the world? And seeing all of the people come out to support for that speech.
I was amazed by the sea of people. I didn't know what I expected.
Yeah.
But I believe almost every seat. I think there was some standing room. I think it was pretty much packed.
It was, and so after the event was over, they came up to me and said, "Hey, this is a record turnout for us," and it was overwhelming to see that. While we don't always see the immediate effect of all of our hard work, all that we're pouring into everybody else, that it's building and it's building. And last night was a sleepless night, just processing everything and then reflecting on, how many people out there in the world are pursuing their passion and their purpose and trying to put their dent in the universe, and then they give up too soon. Because they're afraid they're not making the impact or they're not seeing the results. Right. And how unfortunate that is. And so yesterday was just such a stark and beautiful reminder for me to know to keep pursuing this path, and that I am changing lives, I am impacting people. And even though we sometimes lose sight of that, it was just a beautiful reminder for me. So there's just this sea and flurry of emotions that I've been processing through all the text messages and people sharing stories on social media and everything. It really hit hard.
I will tell you, it's one of those things, like those of us who are, that try, like you said, trying to make your mark in the universe, right? Many folks who see that calling, we understand the value of networking. And you and I talk so much about the power of networking, how that's so important. But to see your network in action, right? I talked to a number of people while you were preparing for your speech. I talked to a number of people, and the young lady I spoke to, she flew in.
Yeah.
Right. Flew in from the other side of the country.
North Carolina.
Yeah, North Carolina. Yeah, and just to see you, to support you.
Yeah.
And that's amazing, because everybody's busy. Everybody has their own journey they're trying to go down, and literally for people to say, you know what, I'm going to hit pause on my thing to go support Sean with his thing, because he's inspired me, or because he's been a key part of my network. And that's what networks do. Yep. Right? We show up and we show out for each other. And you and I joke all the time. We talk about iron sharpens iron. Yep. And I saw a lot of iron sharpening yesterday. It was amazing. And I will tell you, it's one of those things where you hope that you've made an impact, and you hope that people show up. You publicize things. But I got to tell you, I knew from the moment I walked in those front doors, I said, holy crap. I was like, and then I said, well, it's Sean. I mean, why? I was like, it's Sean. Why are you so shocked? Why are you so surprised? But man, I was really, really impressed. And again, I had to leave a little bit early once you finish your segment. But I could tell at the end, even the emotion you put into that effort. And you and I hugged afterwards, and I could hear it in your voice. And I was gonna call you yesterday evening, and I said, you know what, if I was Sean, I'd probably just need some minutes, some hours to myself, because again, the vulnerability that you showed. Not everybody's willing to do that. Yeah. And so I guess a question for you is, as you've done a number of these speaking engagements, how does that last session that you did yesterday, how does that rate in terms of emotional investment that you had to make?
11 of 10. It was just beyond taxing. And here's the thing, even as I was preparing and practicing the speech, there were certain parts while I was practicing at home alone where I would start getting choked up. And I was thinking, shit, am I going to be able to get through this in front of a crowd of people? And it was something that I knew I had to do. And I know that there was a point on stage whenever I started to choke up and had to pull out a tissue for myself, and I was like, fuck, okay, all right. And I had to move through that segment faster than I initially anticipated, just to keep my composure. And that was a point at which I could not make eye contact with anybody in my family during that time of the speech. But it was, and here's the thing, most of the speaking engagements that I do, moderating panels or small little keynotes on building your brand or things like that's just business and life, and that's easy. But whenever you go to that deep place that I went to of my why, it took so much more out of me than I anticipated it would, and I'm still like reeling and trying to recover mentally. My nervous system is still shot from it, because the other element is I spoke at an event on Tuesday, a CIO conference. I spoke at a CISO conference on Wednesday, and then last week I spoke 2 days at a supply chain conference on 2 days.
Wow. Okay.
And so like I have 2 weeks of 5 speaking engagements, and so there was this gradual decline of like my psyche and nervous system, and then to slam it with that speech on Friday, I was like, it took everything I had, and I still couldn't keep it together. But ultimately, I share all of that because I think it's important for people to understand and see that it's okay to be real and raw and vulnerable, which is why I reiterated that numerous times in the speech, and that you being real can inspire others to do what they need to do in their life.
Right.
And part of all the people coming up to me afterwards was, this is exactly what I needed. I know exactly what I need to do now. I've known what I need to do, and you being up there sharing your story is exactly what I needed to take that next step. And so it was just that, like I said, that exchange of energy and experiencing the impact that I was making. And it was a very big moment for me, for my family. Yeah, so it took a lot.
So speaking about your family, so once it was over yesterday, what did your mother say to you?
My brother was struggling to keep it together afterwards, because obviously Lamar passing took its toll on both of us. And he was expressing how proud he was, and because my brother's been a salesman his entire life, and so obviously I kind of joked around about that, which was kind of all in good fun. But he just continued to express how proud he was, how much he loved me, all of that, and so that was good. My mom, stepdad, obviously expressed all of their love and appreciation, and like mom was so proud. It was also challenging because my grandmother, I don't know if you had a chance to meet her, the little short lady.
No.
So we've actually been grappling with her Alzheimer's over the past 2 years. It's just gradually got significantly worse, and it was important to me that she was there, but also like she was like mentally not there the whole day, and so that was tough. And then mom called me last night because whenever they got home, she went over to Ninny's to give her medicine and stuff like that. And Ninny asked mom how long I had been with that girl, and mom's like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, the girl he married. And Ninny thought I got married yesterday, and so like hearing that from my mom, I was like, oh. So it was just like there's just all of these elements, and I only share that because everything that you saw and experienced was a major piece of my life, but then there's also all of these other sublayers, and it's easy for us, especially in business and life, to not have enough context on what everybody else in the world is going through, and to judge, and why aren't they performing? Why are they in a bad mood? And we only see just a microcosm of what's going on in their lives. Yep. And this is part of why whenever I'm talking about leadership is like, build relationships. And people are not going to get that real. People are not always going to open up. But the more context you have, leading people and being on a team, the more grace you can give.
Exactly.
And there's so much to process through all of it, but I'm so blessed and fortunate and appreciative and grateful, just all of the things. And I'm really excited. So we captured We captured it from 3 separate angles. We're going to edit it, throw it out on the podcast, and then put it up on the new speaking website.
It's going to be some good stuff. It's
Yeah.
going to be, because I even think the emotion is going to translate in the video. I mean, it was just really powerful stuff. It was very, very powerful. I mean, it was relatable, right? Even if people may not have experienced exactly what you have experienced, the loss, the occasional feeling of abandonment at times from key people in your life, just struggles, the trying to reach that corporate ladder or what they think is their goals, and then once you get there, okay, now what? I mean, there were so many parts of your story, and I paid attention to the audience. This was cool, because I sat in the back intentionally because I knew I had to leave early, and I didn't want to disturb anyone. But as you were speaking and you hit certain key points of your speech, I watched the audience. And I paid attention to reactions. So when you talked about the loss of the feeling you feel from your biological father and things like that, I just listened. I listened and I watched the audience. And there were several men that when you said that, it was like 3 or 4, at least in my section, that just. So either they themselves went through that, or they know someone very close who did. And then you talked about, the perceived, my goal has always been to climb that ring of the corporate ladder. And then I saw a couple of men and women just lean forward in their seat. And you talk about the courage of an entrepreneur, stepping out on faith, stepping out on your own. And again, it's that those key points you just saw, no matter what people were going through or what their journey looked like, there was something for everyone in that in your story yesterday.
And one of the things that as I was thinking through the message that I wanted to deliver, how I wanted to deliver it, the only reservation, one of the reservations that I had was, am I jumping around too much? Because I opened with a short little story about Andy and Elizabeth and like how the interactions were going, and then I jumped into my early childhood, into IT, and then my corporate career trajectory, and then I went back to my childhood, and then I brought it back to entrepreneurship, and then culminating into overcoming adversity. And so one of the thoughts that I had and a question that I would love your perspective on is, did I jump around too much?
No.
Okay.
The answer is no. Everything came together. Now there's a few points where you say, first of all, everything you said was engaging.
Yeah.
Right. So we were there for the ride. Let's be clear. We bought the ticket. We're on the bus. We are on that ride with you. And then so you had enough, I would say, connectivity with the audience, where even if it wasn't an immediate connection, we were there with you because there's a point to this.
Yeah.
And you didn't take long to get to that. You're like, I get it. And you did it a few times very quickly in the very beginning. So you could have taken us to a galaxy far, far away, and we would have been like, wait for it. He's going to bring. So, but a lot of people don't do that. I've been in a lot of audiences where people have so much they want to share, and they hop. And you're like, so why do we spend 5 minutes talking about this? Because they never really come back to it.
Yeah.
But it was all very succinct. It was great.
Okay.
It was really good.
I put a concerted effort as I was thinking through the stories, because I jumped around my timeline. I wanted to make sure that I was able to pull it together, create continuity, and help everybody understand why I was sharing each piece. Because I am aware that I have a tendency to go down rabbit holes, and also do my best to always pull it back around.
Right.
And there are certain times whenever I actually had breakfast with the CEO recently, and he asked me a point blank question. Now, for some context, this is a very engineering mindset type CEO. He asked me a point blank question, and I started sharing a story to pull it around and explain my answer. And I got 60 seconds in, and he's like, where are you going with this? And immediately I knew, okay, got it.
Got to bring it.
Perfect. I got to bring it down.
Yeah,
he doesn't care about the story. He wants a yes or no. He wants a definition.
Well, he has that engineering mentality.
Exactly. And so that also speaks to the importance of us learning our audience.
Right.
And understanding how to communicate with our audience. We'll let this truck go by.
Montgomery County Food Bank.
But I think it's important to be able to understand your audience, and so I was aware that I was jumping around, and I did put a concerted effort in making sure that as I was crafting the story that I was going to share, that I could tie it all together. Now, an interesting item of note, I am aware also that whenever you practice a speech, let's just say you have a 30-minute window of time, and if you practice and you nail 30 minutes on the dot when you're practicing, it goes much faster.
Yeah.
It's like a time machine. I don't know. So in Tony Watley, which I don't know if you met him yesterday, but he was telling me beforehand, he's like, look, you're going to burn through your speech quick, and because he does a lot of public speaking. And I was like, I know, I'm good. Well, while I was practicing, I actually admittedly was struggling to get down to 30 minutes. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm struggling to hit 30 minutes or to get down to the 30-minute window. Like, I'll be fine. Okay. I got about 95% of the way through the speech and looked down, and I was at the 20-minute mark.
Oh, wow.
So the last 10 minutes were me adapting, creating filler, and like pivoted and tweaking. I had a little bit extra pauses in that the last 10 minutes because I moved through parts of it. And then obviously the part about my dad, I moved through that faster than I was anticipating. But I think that speaks to the importance of getting experience on stage and being able to adapt, watch the clock.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot, and I know you do a lot of speaking and stuff as well, but there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just stand up there and share a story.
Right. Yeah, I've learned that. Time management is that is definitely a finesse that I am still working on as I do my speaking engagements. Now I have the opposite problem. My issue is that I'll practice it. I'm around time.
Yep.
And then when I get up there, there's so much, like I look at the audience and there's certain parts where I see that they're engaged and I want to feed them more. So then I start ad-libbing and adding more. It makes sense, but but I have to be mindful that time constraint is still there.
That's a good point. Now, okay, so that is actually a really good point because in one of my events earlier in the week, it was more of an interactive working session. And we ended up running overtime because I was talking about building your personal brand. But there was engagement. I could see people leaning in. And so when you see that curiosity, to your point, you want to feed it more. Whenever I was up on stage, I couldn't see shit because the lights were
pretty intense.
They are.
You're right.
So I didn't have as much insight into where the audience was picking up on. I was listening for laughs and cues and things like that, but I could barely see anything because those lights are just so blinding.
Right.
And again, it's just, I've now been stepping on stages for 4 years now, and that speech was the most stressful, the most taxing on my nervous system because also I went to a deep place.
Yeah.
But that one was it was a big moment, and I couldn't think of a more perfect way for me to wrap the 2024 year than to deliver that and be surrounded by so many people that cared so much. It was just like, I'm just beyond grateful for everything that has happened in my life. All the challenges, all the adversity that I struggled to get through, like, I wouldn't change it for the world.
Oh, that's great. That's a good message. You mentioned earlier about, understanding that people have things going on, right? And having that, having that leadership style that looks into that. And it's really interesting because you and I we kick around ideas about leadership and what does good leadership look like. And it made me think about, how typical businesses operate when we talk about performance, right? So you have leaders, and you have an employee, for example, say they're not performing. And if they're not performing, then how do leaders typically deal with that? So you report to me, let's say you're a salesperson and you haven't hit your numbers. The typical leader will go into your office and say, hey, Sean, look, you hadn't hit your numbers the last 2 quarters. We really need to figure out how to turn this around, because if not, and we're still here this time next quarter, we may have to have an uncomfortable conversation. And you think about that. How motivated will you be to come to work the next day and give your 110%, right? Versus showing empathy and having an alternative, like, is everything okay? Right? is anything going on that we should talk about to get you back to the level that I know you are, because I know you're better than this.
Yep.
Right? And it's just taking that extra step. And so when you were talking about that, it's like, I'm wondering, like, how often do you see that? Because you work with so many companies, you work with a lot of CEOs, like when they talk about trying to enhance employee performance, how often do you think managers think about having an empathetic ear versus punitive?
And I think, so this is a very important topic, and part of the reason, was one of the major drivers of why I do what I do and why I love what I do, because ultimately what you just described, in my opinion, is the result of an undeveloped leader not knowing how to interact, work, coach, guide, mentor, and build an employee that maybe has hit a little bit of a lull or some challenging times. And many times this is a result of the Peter principle. Somebody was a great salesman, they get promoted into a sales manager role. Cool, they know how to close, but they don't know how to coach and build closers. And so the leader in this instance, the sales manager in this instance, their mindset, well, why don't you just do it? Why don't you just do it? Well, you're not where you need to be. How do we get you there? Well, it's the leader's responsibility to figure out how to get them there, to understand, to your point, why are we seeing this dip? Is there something deeper going on? Does their grandmother have dementia and they're struggling with this stuff going on at home? Okay, but once you start figuring out, okay, what is the cause of the dip or the decline in the performance? Okay, now we can be a little bit more empathetic. Now we can figure out, is there anything we can do to support you? Like, can we have, like, pay for a spa day for you to unplug and, just, or is there anything we can do for your family? Things like that. And yes, those things cost money. I'm well aware. But in the grand scheme of things, if you spend $1,000 to support an employee and their family, and then all of a sudden they get to a better headspace, they start closing more deals, the ROI, it's like stupid. But far too many managers, they're so hyper-focused on the numbers instead of the people. And if you focus on the people, the numbers will come. Now, you also have to layer on the complexity, especially in publicly traded organizations where you have shareholders, you have stock price, and if it's not performing, it's forcing certain behaviors. And a lot of leaders, they become increasingly short-sighted on just get the results, get the results, get the results. And what happens is you burn out the employees. If you're beholden to stockholders or shareholder, whatever, there's a lot of complexity there. And so I don't like to bash on leaders in publicly traded organizations because I'm well aware of the stressors and pressure, but there are certain dynamics, and I think a lot of employees just, it's not even part of their schema. They don't have a clue as to the pressures the senior leadership is under.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that is why I believe it is so crucial that people start to develop skills around becoming a more effective leader as they are promoted into leadership positions. There's just not a significant focus and emphasis on it. People think, I got to get this certification, I got to get this certification, and they don't focus on the soft skills that actually really move the needle.
I couldn't have said it any better. I mean, so, and I want to be clear what we're talking about here, right? Because at no point are you saying that the results don't matter. You're not saying
Not at all.
You're not saying that everybody has to be this touchy-feely, flowery, everybody's holding hands singing Kumbaya. You're not saying that the end results don't matter.
Yep.
You're just saying that having that empathetic ear and just taking a moment, right, and taking a step back and just having a human aspect, say, hey, is everything okay? Doesn't mean that you still don't expect that employee to perform.
100%. I mean, and that's the thing. And this all comes down to communication skills. Because yes, the results do matter. You can't just say, oh, well, it doesn't matter if we make money. Well, we're in business to make money, and you can't operate in the red indefinitely, just making sure people's feelings are okay. And so what you have to do is be able to meet them where they're at. Make sure that they understand how important it is to hit these numbers, how important it is to them, to the team, to the company, to hit all of these things. And then start to understand why the dip. Maybe it's a personal issue. Maybe they're just in a funk. And being able to communicate, okay, well, if you're in a funk, we've got to figure out how to get you out of this funk. And then start setting expectations. And I also like to say, okay, you normally sell 100 grand a month, or whatever the number is. You're currently at 50. Why do you think we've seen this dip? You have to take them on a journey, and you have to ask them the right questions. And I like to envision leaving a trail of breadcrumbs by asking the right questions. Why did your sales dip? Well, I don't know. Well, they probably know. And they probably don't want to talk about it. And so if you build that relationship, you build that trust, they will open up and start sharing more. Cool, now we know. Or it's, I hate Sally over here, and she's just pissing me off every day and I can't think on my sales. Okay, so that's a different dynamic, but you have to have the conversation. And then also say, look, we have to get back to 100 grand a month in sales, because if we don't, then this. And so you set those expectations and then say, what can I do to support you to get back here? And then you have to start understanding how to have levels of escalation to the conversation. Say, look, man, if we can't get there this quarter, we're gonna have to start figuring something else out. If they don't hit there this quarter, Njsane, man, we talked about this, and like things are getting really tight. I've given you this, and these are the things you said that you need. And learning how to have those conversations and levels of escalation is, again, something that not a lot of leaders are familiar with. They bottle it all up and like, why isn't Njsane getting there? And they just don't know how to have the conversation, so they internalize it and it just bubbles up, and then I'm firing Njsane.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that. I've seen that a lot. And I remember I talked to one manager in a previous life, and they love to say, well, I didn't need that growing up. I didn't need that coming up through the ranks. We were in, like you said, we're here to run a business. We have an EAP, EAP hotline, right? Let's send them the EAP hotline. And I remember looking at that manager and just thinking like, man, I'm so glad I don't work for you.
Yeah.
Because, and then it was funny because in that specific situation, we did find out that the individual was going through a very, very difficult divorce. And it's one of those things where if you really are plugged into your employees and what's going on with them, and you understand like this person has been performing at this level for the last 3 or 4 years, then all of a sudden this year has just sucked. And it's not due to industry issues or whatever, you just don't know. People will just think, oh, well, he's just coasting, or she's just coasting, and they just feel like, oh, they've done so well the last few years. And that's literally what that manager was going off the assertion, was that, well, I guess I've given him too many attaboys, and he's taking it for granted, and so now I have to crack the whip. And I said, well, there may be more to that. But his initial reaction was, I'm not running a social program here. We have services for that. I need him to perform. He's a sales guy. I need him to go sell. And I just looked at him and said, man, that is one of the most short-sighted things. And by any other metric that most companies go by, that leader, you would consider them a successful leader.
Yeah.
Which is
I think we're incenting the wrong behaviors. And I've got a lot of experience in the comp and benchmarking and just the HR arena, and a lot of incentive programs are strictly on the numbers. And again, this is business. Like, we have to drive certain outcomes.
The numbers matter.
The numbers do matter. But also when a situation arises and something goes wrong due to decisions that were made by certain people in the organization, something goes wrong, and then the leaders are able to orchestrate some sort of a way to bonus themselves if they fix the problem that they created. How are you incenting the right behaviors? Because like, oh yeah, we created this problem, but we're going to fix it, and when we fix it, we're going to bonus ourselves. Well, we created the problem. Like, that is not the right way to incent behaviors. There has to be some sort of accountability at some point.
Yeah, right.
And accountability is, that's a galactic can of worms that nobody wants to touch, because it's always like, well, Njsane's team won't perform. Njsane's team won't perform. And then Njsane's perspective is like, well, my team needs Sean's team to do their job, and Sean's not doing his job. So like, if you can't be successful because you need something from my team, and then I get mad at you because you're not delivering, like how the hell does that make sense?
Oh, it's just a vicious cycle.
It's
It's one of those things. I remember while you were just talking just now, I was thinking about this. I love Simon Sinek.
Yeah.
He throws so many great gems out there. And he was talking about the Navy SEALs.
Yep.
You may have seen that clip.
Oh
right?
yeah, I know what you're talking
It's a
about.
beautiful clip, and he's talking about the Navy SEALs, which is one of the most high-performing organizations in the world. And he put it on a matrix and on an axis, and he basically said, performance versus trust,
Yep.
right? And you're talking about, the leadership skills and the behaviors. And the bottom quadrant represents low trust, low performance. Nobody wants that.
Yep.
Right? But everybody wants the high performing, high trust. Great if you can get it. Right?
Yep.
But then you have the high performance, low trust, which is that toxic leader.
Yep.
And he talks about how companies these days have a million metrics to measure performance, but very few things to identify trust.
Yeah.
And in fact, when he talked to Navy SEAL leaders, they say, I would much rather have a medium performance, high trust, or in some cases even a low performance, high trust, than that low trust, high performance person. But unfortunately, because we don't measure trust in business these days, the trustworthiness, it's that particular person who tends to high performance because they hit their numbers. That's the person who gets promoted. That's how we reward people with bonuses, and that's how toxic people get promoted. And employees wonder that all the time, like, how in the heck does this asshole get promoted? Like everybody, because in a company, everybody knows who the asshole is.
Oh yeah.
You can talk to Sally, you can talk to Jim. Everybody knows who the asshole is, but that person is always on the payroll, and they still get rewarded. How do you think that happens nowadays?
Well, I think it's just such an increased emphasis and focus on strictly the numbers. And, whenever it comes to running a business, you have to, I believe, that you have to extend the time horizons at which you are envisioning things to occur. And people get hyper-focused on the next quarter financial statements, the next quarter, and so they lean into the numbers. And yes, you can crack a whip and get people to do things. The problem is that leads to insane levels of attrition. And attrition is more than just the onboarding fees that are actual hard costs that you can quantify. It's all the soft costs associated with that tacit knowledge that's constantly exiting the organization. You're constantly training new people. New people are constantly coming in and they have a better idea of how to do things, and they just flip the table over without understanding why things were done the way they were. They're like, oh, I've done it this way in the past. So they flip the table over, and then they get pissed off at the big boss, and then they leave, and it's just like this vicious cycle. But to your point, like, it is very difficult to quantify and measure trust. It's easy to quantify dollars, not easy to quantify trust. And so whenever I look at, employee performance reviews and things like that, there's just a lot of challenges around it. But what's so interesting, whenever you start talking about trust and culture in an organization, every employee can experience it and feel it. They just can't quantify it. You walk into the doors of a high trust, high performing organization and you feel the energy. Oh yeah. But how do you put a number to that for a CFO? It will have downstream effects on the numbers, but the CFO probably doesn't always know the driver of that. They think it's the asshole salesperson, and they just attribute it to that, not knowing that it's supply chain, it's distribution, it's marketing, it's all the other people that are behind the salesperson.
Right.
And so they're just not looking at it through the right lens. And so I think that, and this is actually something I'd be keen to hear a perspective. The last time I reviewed or looked at different performance management systems, it was probably like 5 years ago. It was a little while back. But we assessed 6 different systems. And this is at a point whenever they were going to this whole idea and concept of we're not going to do annuals, we'll do quarterlies, and then we're going to do monthlies, and we're going to do biweekly check-ins because it's those check-ins and touch points that are important. And then we're going to go away from a rating system at all. We're not going to give 1 through 5 because numbers hurt feelings, and we don't want to do that. And my question was, okay, so hold on. I got to unwind this because very logic-brained, data-driven. And I'm like, okay, hold on. How do you gauge progress or people regressing? And they're like, well, the manager should be having these conversations. I'm like, but at some point you have to quantify it. And they're like, I kind of hem-hawing around about it because it was all leaning into the touchy-feely side, which is important to be able to build connections with the employees. But at some point you have to quantify it. Okay, stay with me. Promise I'm pulling it together.
I trust you. I mentioned that. We're in the story. I'm on the bus. Let's go.
And so the thing that I think is so important is that we don't lose sight of the fact that the numbers are important. We've been dancing around this, right? The numbers are important, but you also have to have the communication, the culture, the trust. You also have to do that. And I think we're in this weird place where the pendulum is just kind of swinging back and forth. Well, feelings are important, where numbers are important. At some point, we have to kind of settle in and find a healthy balance of how to do this. Now, my question that I have for you is whenever it comes to performance management systems, where is your head at on these different systems' ability to track employee performance, management performance over time? Because everything that I looked at historically, it was like a point in time snapshot. Okay, Sean's team, average rating, 3, 3, 4, whatever it was. Okay, next year, average rating, 3, 3, 4. And my first question is, okay, how do I track this over time to see is Sean becoming a better manager or a worse manager? And it just this was 6 different companies that do performance management. It was like their mind was blown. They're like, what do you mean track it over time? Like, we just want to look at this year. I'm like, you can't be serious right now. And they're like, well, we can work with our development team and see if we can build a custom report. And at first I thought it was an anomaly. And then after meeting with 5 different, and this is like Cornerstone, this is ADP, this is like, my mind was blown. I was like, you have to get me in touch with the right person here. Has any of that changed?
I wish I could say yes, but not really. Okay. And here's why. And it's not out of a lack of, folks trying to figure it out. So first thing is, when you talk about measuring performance, let's break it down to the grassroots aspect of it, right? You talk about measuring performance.
Yep.
A performance management system is only as good as the competencies that they measure against. Now, where do those competencies come from? They come from the organization. And the organization tells the HCM or whoever's implementing the system, they say, okay, when we start the performance management system, here are the things we want to measure against, right? Here are the leadership competencies, here are the behaviors, whatever. And unfortunately, the folks who are feeding it we're still stuck in this whole archaic, I wouldn't say draconian, but this archaic viewpoint. Okay, results and technical ability, and and if the organization is really advanced, sometimes they even have positional based performance reviews where not everybody in the company has the exact same competencies. A sales manager will have different competencies versus an HR person. Because our goals and our activities are different. Doesn't happen too often, but sometimes you see that. So you build in the competencies and you look at, okay, so what are they measuring? How often are these conversations taking place? And we get so caught up on the numbers. Okay, this person got rated a 4 here and this person got rated a 3 here. But what I've noticed in my career, I've been in HR for more than 20 years, and is that commentary is what's missing. The commentary and the narratives are missing. I can see that you're a 3, and in most companies, a 3 in communication. And in most companies, 3 is solid, meets expectations. Okay. And that's usually kind of an aggregate number. I'm kind of compiling it over the year.
Yeah.
But let's say this year I had to get on you a few times about being too direct and being too dogmatic about things. Let's say you improve that. But then there were some other issues the following year where I needed you to communicate to me about delays in projects, and you kind of fell off on that. Now, in both of these situations, it wasn't bad, and you still got a 3. But if I'm only looking at the number, and I leave and the next manager comes in, they say, oh, well, this person is meeting this expectation, and there's no adjustment in terms of coaching in that communication skill. Versus organizations really focusing on the commentary behind the measurements of those competencies, because that's where the magic happens. It's me saying, yes, I gave him a 3 because overall he is meeting my expectations. However, if Sean wants to grow and he wants to move up and he wants to take my job one day, which I certainly hope he wants to do, he needs to be able to alter his communication style to not only be able to talk to C-suite, but also frontline employees, because I'm going to expect him to get things done through others. And you can't talk to a frontline supervisor like you're talking to the board of directors. And that's where the magic happens, because now we're talking about the secret sauce. Now we're talking about, yeah, communication's good, but what about communication do we need to work on? Do we need to evolve? Do we need to redirect? Or do we need to encourage more of? Because I see that he or she does these things really, really well. And in order to measure performance over time, you've got to have that commentary, and many managers just don't want to do it. They still see performance management as a pencil whipping exercise. They see it because HR sent 15 million emails saying I've got to do it. And some companies they get so serious about it, they say, oh, your bonus is dependent on you actually going through these processes. But unless we have the story, unless we have the commentary behind each competency, and not just be so hooked on the numbers are a great starting point.
Yep.
But they don't tell the true measurement, the true outcome, unless the manager who is actually observing these behaviors is able to, unless we see that story, we're only getting half of the story.
So I agree with absolutely everything that you just said. And my hope, and some might label me an eternal optimist, but my hope is that as we continue to better understand how to leverage AI, that we can use that to address this very issue. Okay, yes, the numbers are important. The context about why Sean needed communication coaching on year 1 and a different type of communication coaching on year 2, that is lost over time. Now, AI is only as good as the data that is used, which is a whole nother topic. But we can let's model this out with an assumption that we've trained the managers how to just write 3 sentences of why you rate somebody a 3.
Right.
We start capturing that over time. Now, all of that context, or we'll refer to it as metadata in this instance, all of that context and everything is lost over time with attrition, because the manager, that's part of the tacit knowledge that I was talking about that exits the organization. They lose that. And so all of that context is lost over time. However, if you're able to layer AI over the top of all of this data and make some assumptions that you're capturing accurate and not data, that contextual data that is influenced by disdain or frustration or anything like that.
Some kind of bias or something.
Yeah, some kind of bias or something like that. Think about how powerful that can be in driving organizational change and performance. Because yes, you have the numbers to quantify, you have the context behind it. The AI can start leaning into that and recommending customized learning plans through your LMS that you're using. Hey, Sean needs communication on this and this. Sean did great this year on this, but he sucked this year on this. Whenever I was in Palm Springs 6 weeks ago, I was talking about the future of leadership leveraging AI. I wish I would have thought about this, because that is extremely powerful. And I would love to say, or some might say, well, that's 5-10 years in the future. But if we look at the rate of progression of AI, it might not be.
I give us 3 years.
Yeah, it's insane. Now, and so I think everything that you just touched on is extremely important. The challenge that I see in the performance management space, specifically around applications that handle performance management, whether it's Cornerstone or ADP or whatever you use, is you have a whole bunch of software people developing systems with people telling them what to do, and people don't know how to talk to technical people.
Right.
So the people that can bridge that communication gap,
very few.
Very
There's
few.
not a lot of those. Yeah.
There's not. And, again, I think therein lies an opportunity to help cross-functional teams collaborate more, which is one of the things that I am eternally grateful for my former employer for giving me the opportunity to lead all of these different functional domains, because very, very, very few people ever get that level of experience or exposure. But yeah, I think using AI for something like that, I mean, that is a beautiful use case for it. You have to operate under some assumptions that we're capturing some data that's not biased, but that's a whole other topic. But very, very interesting.
Oh, it is, and so now you messed around and brought up AI, which is kind of a hobby of mine now. It's not even just let's take a step back. You talked about using AI to kind of layer it on top of some of the PM systems to help track trends and help tell the full story. But even projecting performance, looking forward. So I'm going to get real world application and a very recent one, right? So I actually have a position open right now.
Okay.
All right. It's a key role. And I talked to the recruiter and I told her, hey, here's what I'm looking for. And she worked on the job description. And the recruiting team at my organization, chef's kiss. They are awesome. They are great at sitting down with hiring managers, understanding what's behind the job description, what are those skills that we may not have listed so that we can include it. They're great. And it was just amazing. Like the week before I had the position open, I had just went through a seminar about how some companies are using AI to help with resume sourcing. Now, I know people will listen to this and be like, oh, here we go. That's what's wrong, because the computer's reading resumes and it's rejecting people because I don't have the right, But just bear with me. So what I did was I got resumes that had been screened by a human, right? They did the phone screen by a human. And these were the 15 resumes. And it was a lot of resumes that came in. There's a lot of great people out there looking for opportunities. And they sent me these 15 resumes. I said, Jesus Christ, I'm on a plane. I don't have time to read through 15 resumes. So what I did was I took AI and I took the resumes, took names, I took a bunch of, I didn't use any identifiable information.
Good.
And I just put the experience and the skills, that paragraph everybody likes to put with the 15 bullet points about what they're great at. And I took those and I uploaded into AI along with the job description. And I said, AI, taking into account these variables, looking at job history, looking at time in each role, looking at roles and titles that typically lead you to believe that they had higher levels of progression and larger scopes and responsibility. I had about 10 of those things. Rate each resume from 15 to 1, with 1 being top, 15 being the least. Now, and it spit out this great report on each one. Something that it did that I did not anticipate it doing was basically saying, I think it was like number 14 or number 15. And typically you're like, oh, I don't want to look at those. But it said, reviewing this individual's resume, concerns about tenure. Some jobs tend to have ended abruptly, blah, 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 blah. However, it should be noted that in several of the key positions identified on the document, that this individual, the blend of experience that they've had may present a unique opportunity to leverage in terms of some of the cross-geographical things we're doing some work we're doing between the US and Canada, which is going to be a key part of this role, which you've identified as something you're looking for. So this should be considered. And I was like, holy crap. And so so when people hear about AI helping with sourcing, they immediately think, okay, this is another technology that's going to kill the human aspect about it, and it's going to disqualify more than it qualifies. But it goes into, it wasn't me just saying, AI, pick the best resume. It's about me as the human saying, here's what I'm looking for, and you have to feed it. And you can't be lazy about it. Because what we want to do is, you got some people who avoid AI altogether.
Yep.
Like it's the Black Plague, like we don't want to touch it. But then you have other individuals who see AI as, okay, doing my job for me. But if you put in the work and you put in what you're looking for, you put in these data points, it could be a great collaboration and partnership to make your job a whole lot easier. And even if when AI spits out this recommendation, you got to check it. You've got to follow behind it. You still need to take a look at some of them, make sure it's summarizing it correctly, because it's not perfect. And at the end of the day, you as the hiring manager, you got to take a look at what it kicks out, because you can't take it at face value all the time. But it is a great, great help in terms of that, in terms of looking forward, in terms of what you might need.
You have gone and done it now. Okay.
In phase 2 of this episode, we're going to talk about AI.
We're going into the AI segment of the show now. So I spoke on this very topic not last week, week before, and then ended up doing a little side workshop afterwards. But yes, I mean, nobody can dispute how powerful AI is. Yes, there's segments of the population that don't want to touch it, others that are leaning into it and becoming too dependent on it. But there were a few very important points that you touched on, and that is, you knew the role, you knew what you were looking for, you knew the context around all of it, you knew the prompts to give the AI, and then you were open to the feedback from the AI, and because of your knowledge of the organizational needs and structure, you were able to assess those additional comments that it provided and say, oh, that makes sense. I might need to look into this. Now, my concern is and this is like broader macro level, is as humans become increasingly dependent on AI, my fear is they will start to lose the capacity to have that context around the broader needs of the organization and the world. Because you think about this, how many instances do somebody say, hey, here's this article, give me the key points? And then they walk away with 3 bullet points and like, oh, I command this knowledge because I read 3 bullet points that ChatGPT gave me. Okay. Yes, so there is value in acceleration of your ability to move through work. Yes. We cannot allow ourselves to become so dependent on it that we lose all of the context and understanding of what's actually happening. Because again, AI is only as good as the data we feed into it. And so so if we look at silicon compute and biological compute, our brains, this is interactive. And if we become overly dependent on the AI and lose our own ability to think, it's going to create bigger issues for us.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, it can be an extremely powerful tool for us, but this is the conversation that I don't think anybody's having right now. Well, I'm sure some people are having it, but
we're having it.
We're having it. Yeah, the smart people in the room.
I love it.
So it's just, it is an extremely powerful tool, and fortunately, there's a lot of organizations out there that are very gun shy and nervous and hesitant for good reason, because there is a significant amount of risk that you introduce into the corporation when you start to leverage AI, especially if you use it for decision making. Because let's go back to the accountability conversation. When it comes to AI, even the people who design it don't fully understand how it gets to the answers that it gets to, because they designed the learning algorithm and then they feed data into it and then it spits out an answer. But they don't always know how to connect the dots on how it got to the answer. They can look at the source data and deduce how it got there, but they don't exactly know. So as people and organizations start to lean more heavily into using it, and they start taking the AI's result as the right answer, at some point, somebody's going to get sued, a death is going to happen, something major is going to happen. And it's going to be very unfortunate, because they're going to go, Njsane, why did you make this decision that ultimately ended up in a fatality on the job site? Well, ChatGPT told me that's what I should do. I mean, that's going to be a very real thing at some point in the future, but you, the human, are responsible. And so from a legal and risk mitigation perspective, these are the things that, I mean, obviously all the attorneys and general counsels that I'm speaking with are like freaking out over it. While at the same time, They're using AI to summarize all of their legal documents and figure out, like, okay, where do I need to hone in on? And again, they're missing out on context. They're signing legal documents without reading through all. And look, let's be clear. Legal documents are a shit show of word salad that are meant to confuse and drive up bill rates. I get it. But we do have to piece. No, I'm not going to go through it. I was about to dive into that. But, legal documents. Man, I get torqued up. Per section A3B, you
all
go
of
to
our
A3B.
lawyer friends are going to comment on that like, well.
I know, the lawyers, please just tune out now. Yeah. But, per section 3AB part 2, and then you go up to that, read section 3AB part 2, and then that references section 1A25.
Absolutely.
It's like, okay, I have to jump through this. Yeah. Anyways, so I went down. Normally I can pull it all back together. I just didn't pull it back.
That's okay. I'm there again. I'm there on the journey with you. But no, but at the end of the day, look, you said it. Context matters. Okay. And we talked about performance management systems a little while ago. Now we're talking about AI. Regardless of what we're talking about, if you're talking about performance management, systems are great. Systems make things more efficient. But you know what performance management is? It's communication. You know what the best communication is? This right here. All right? Sitting down with an employee, eyeball to eyeball. Let's have a cup of coffee for 15 minutes.
Yep.
How are you doing? Do you have everything you need? What can I do best to support you? And that is performance management, right? The system is just how to track it.
Yep.
And how to break it up into digestible chunks. But it's communication. You talk about AI, you can't get lazy about it. You can't get lazy. You got to do the work. You have to be very cognizant of what you're putting in and what you're trying to get out of it. If you say, okay, I just use ChatGPT to help out with emails. That's great. That's awesome. Okay, but you have to be you can't just copy and paste it. Because all it's going to do is going to take that email. You say, okay, rewrite this email to sound more collaborative and more concise. Okay? You got to make sure that when it took in that word concise, it didn't take out something that was a key element of that email. When you say make it sound more collaborative, okay, but make sure that it delivers the gravitas of that message, because if it needs to be a serious communication, that there's some things people need to take away when they open an email, you got to make sure that ChatGPT didn't cut that out or didn't water it down so they don't get that same sentiment. I mentioned earlier when I used it to look at resumes, there was a ton of pre-work I had to do. I had to sit down and talk to stakeholders who were going to interact with this role. What's important to you in terms of behaviors? Okay, then I had to make sure ChatGPT was aware of that, or the AI system that I used was aware of it. I had to make sure I knew what I wanted out of this role and what those soft skills were. And then once it kicked out its analysis, I had to sit my butt down and not run off with that information. I had to sit down, read it. As a human being, does that make sense to me? And some things it said, I was like, nah, that's a computer being a computer. And I had to kind of strike that. But it was a good 75% solution. But the only reason why I trust that 75%, Sean, is because I did the work and I didn't let AI do the work for me.
Yep.
It's no different than you having a great analyst on your staff. And you're saying, okay, analyst who's been out of university for 3 or 4 years, right? Take all this data, create a Power BI dashboard, provide me an executive summary. If you're an executive, you're not going to take that and put it in front of the board. Even though that person may have went to, Cornell or, Harvard, or they may have went to a very top school.
I know a lot of executives that would.
Yes. I know 1 or 2 myself. But you don't take that and then put it in front of the board of directors. What do? You get it, you sit down with it, and you go through it and make sure it makes sense. And if it doesn't, then you go back to that analyst and help. Same thing with AI. You should take the same approach with any tool like that. And take a look at it, review it, and make sure it makes sense if it passes the sniff test. And don't be afraid to go back, and reevaluate and take a look at what you put in and what you got out. But again, you got some people who get a new tool, spell check, that'll solve everything. Well, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
Grammarly, it'll solve all my grammatical issues. Well, sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. But it's a great tool as long as you're still willing to put in the work to make sure that it makes sense.
Yeah. You know, another thing, as you were kind of talking through that, I started thinking through how much it can move the needle on someone's personal brand in a positive and negative direction. Because let's be real, you look at a lot of resumes all the time. How confident are you in your ability to see and know if a resume was written by AI or a human? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Transformational change. Like, my God, Chatty, just take it out of your vocabulary.
Exactly.
Like, stop using transformational. Stop, like,
Strategic.
Yeah, strategic. Like, and the thing that's so unfortunate is those words have become so watered down because now every post you see on social media to drive transformational change, like, that used to mean something.
Yes.
And if you look at, like, Google actually, they track and trend the use of certain words over years. So you can like type in how often or, you know, what is the use of the word transformational. And you can see over the past, 15 years or however long Google's been tracking it, it's like, and then since ChatGPT came out, so like out on the internet, certain words. And so it just screams AI, and it almost tarnishes someone's brand because you're like, okay, do they actually know what they're doing, or they just have ChatGPT creating all of their content and just pumping it out? And people know.
Yeah.
And I think that as we continue to lean into AI more and more, and then also we look at like AI image generation, and then Sora and all of these AI video generation technologies, and how scary deepfakes are becoming now. Like, it's a whole thing.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. And I believe that as we move more towards this increasingly virtual world, those people that have skills around doing this right here are ultimately going to hold the keys to the kingdom. They are going to be the most successful because we are going to crave human interaction. And as we move to this increasingly virtual world, there's going to be less and less of it. Like, we can't unwind millions of years of evolution as humans in a decade just because this new virtual world has come out. And so, like, these are just like, big topics to think through. But yes, AI is an extremely powerful tool, but I don't want us to lose our humanity in the process.
No, and there's room for both. There's room for both. I mean, listen, if you go back in history during the Industrial Revolution, when the Model T Ford came out, right, or the invention of the assembly line, we go through this, right? We go through these points. The computers, when computers they went from a warehouse size to now they fit in our pockets. Anytime there's a technological advance, there's this fear that all of a sudden, it's going to replace us, it's going to do all these things. And, AI is probably the closest that we may come to that. And don't get me started we talk about the singularity, we talk about some other things.
Oh
right?
my God, we're going to, okay.
We can totally nerd we can totally
nerd
out.
People can talk about the singularity.
Hey, listen, let's get our Red Bull in our Hot Pockets and we can totally nerd out on this, right? But no, it's just one of those things where it will change things. And we as human beings, as we've done for millions of years, will need to continue to evolve. But what I said still holds true. You've got to still put the work in. There will be those of us who will maximize the things that AI brings. Again, you take a look at, like I talked about with the resume. There'll be those of us who will become lazy and complacent. And those people will fall by the sword. Because you're right, you can go on a post right now and you can say, oh, that's AI generated. Because you'll see the same verbiage. Now, I will say this. I know a lot of content creators that operate in this space that do use AI, right? And they're very upfront about it. Those people who are good at what they do, it does not diminish the quality of their content. Because they've established a credibility, and it's still great content. And at the end of the day, do we necessarily care that it's AI? The reason why we care it's AI is because we're worried about it being this watered down, repetitive, no value add type content. That's the reason why people are all worried about it. But if I know somebody has been doing what they've been doing for 15, 20 years, and they have a background in leadership coaching and executive coaching, and I've seen them present, and I've seen how they attract audiences and deliver value add content. Do I care if Sean Barnes used AI to tweak a post? I couldn't give a damn about that, right? But if somebody who's I know they graduated from university 2 years ago, and it's not an issue against Gen Zs or millennials, but if you've been out of university for 2 years, and I look on your LinkedIn post and you say I'm a transformational leader, I'm like, no, you're not. How could you be? No one is giving you an organization to transform. I find that very tough to believe.
Yeah.
So my thing is, it's not the use of AI that's the problem. But we as humans have the ability, whether you're talking about fire or a hammer or a knife, we as human beings have the ability to use tools for good or for evil. It's not the tool, but it's the person who's holding the tool that has to keep their humanity and stay focused on what really matters. And it's about not, as advanced as we get, not losing that human touch. And there's your coffee break.
And there's your coffee talk. Jeez.
Oh no, this is great.
Oh my God. I'm so glad we mic'd up this time. For those of you that are still paying attention to this episode, this is what Njsane and I talked about every single time. And every single time. At the end, we're like, damn it, we should have been mic'd up.
I was just about to say, it's so funny because we do these things all the time, and we say, that should have been recorded. Now it's lost to the ether, and we can't remember what it was.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But I'm glad we recorded it this time, right?
Exactly. I'm going to take the transcript, dump it into ChatGPT, so I can summarize.
As you should.
Yeah,
as you should.
For sure.
We talked about a lot of good stuff, right? But it's. I mean, look, AI is like anything else. We just have to be smart about it. And the thing is, and this is the other thing. This is where I'll leave it at. It's up to actual transformative leaders to stay on top of these developments, right? So that we can lead our organizations in terms of how we should be using it. And let's be clear, I have cautious optimism, right? You need to don't just dive in head first. You need to know what this thing is capable of. You need to understand how it's being used. But you need to understand how our organization's using it, where organizations have slipped and tripped, and where they have been able to find efficiencies and find value add.
Yeah. And
continue to build off of that. You need to educate yourself. You need to read books and LinkedIn articles. I mean, the stuff is out there. Go to seminars, talk to human beings in terms of that who have used this stuff, and see what their experiences have been, and then try it out for yourself on a limited basis. Doesn't mean you need to put your next board presentation through that, but if you're struggling with an email and you're like, okay, let me see what this AI thing is all about, and you have the key points that you need to address, plop it into something, as long as your company doesn't have a policy against it. But plop it in there, see how it works, dip your toe into the water, and then go from there, and don't just go ahead in and just do your entire 5-year strategic plan based off of what ChatGPT said. But we as leaders have to stay educated about this, so that we can guide our teams in terms of best use of AI.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better.
I wonder what this line is about.
I don't know. I've been watching it.
Because they're all going
I guess there's a coffee shop over there or something.
I don't know.
Maybe. They're missing out. This is where the best coffee's at, here at Good City.
Look at that shameless plug. You must be a part owner in Good City.
No, I just have all sorts of
points.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with having points.
But so this is normally my go-to coffee spot. And it's so crazy. Speaking of the human connection, I came here, I've been coming here for years, but about a year ago, met somebody here, kind of working through some stuff with their business, and I was kind of giving some guidance and things like that. And the guy at the table next to me, after we finished up and kind of wrapped up and started to go our separate ways, he's like, hey, excuse me, like, are you a business coach, or like, what do you do? And I was just getting started with WSS. And so we had a great conversation. Come to find out, he was a serial entrepreneur and like doing phenomenal, has a handful of different companies that have just been growing and growing. And he and I have actually built a good friendship and a relationship, and we'll still meet here occasionally, and like almost seen him as kind of a mentoring guy, because like I shared yesterday, like sales is not something that I'm comfortable with at all. And he has done sales for multiple decades, and so he's been able to kind of give me tips and guidance on how to navigate conversations and things like that. And so all of that came from just meeting here and being open to a new connection that I met here at the coffee shop. And that speaks into how important it is to not lose our humanity and continue to build skills around connecting with people and communication.
Yeah. I mean, it's really important. And I mean, again, people, you can't be afraid to reach out, again, connect with people, and don't be afraid of those potential connections.
Yep.
Because you just never know. I mean, again, you look at us 2 or 3 years ago when we first met. We met at that conference, and it was like,
I don't even know how we got onto the topic of gaming, and
I don't know.
Like, that was so crazy. Like, just in a few minutes, we're like, oh my God, did we become best friends?
I think we just did. But it was like a bromance from the beginning, and it was just like, oh, okay, all right. I mean, but it's one of those things like, if I was a standoffish, shook hands, we walked off, right?
Yep.
I mean, the things that have translated since you and I have met, like, are so. I mean, there's no value on it, right? We've introduced others, folks in our networks. Yep. We've made additional connections. I've learned a lot in terms of delivering content. It's just, and if you don't take that chance, you'll never know.
Yeah.
If you don't take that leap, and you don't have to go out and get in front of a stage for your first, action, especially if you're an introvert. And I know you continue to claim to be an introvert.
What was?
Oh, past tense. Okay.
Past tense.
You're a reformed introvert.
Well, but here's the thing. So it's interesting. What is it called? Ambivert? Is that what it is?
I have never heard of it.
So I think at my core. Are you familiar with behavioral assessments like DISC? So I love these behavioral assessments, and people, on the fence, everybody has a different perspective on them. But what's so interesting is, and this is probably a whole nother topic, but like, I've taken my DISC 3 times over an 8-year span of time. And seeing how my dot has moved over the years is fascinating, confusing, but also an incredible example of how we can evolve. Now, I still have introvert tendencies. Doing this gives me energy, but at the same time, like yesterday, for example, I had tons of energy during it, and then I went home and just out. And I just needed to introvert hard, turn my phone off, like, just leave me alone type of a thing. And so I think there's still elements of who we are. We can stretch, we can adapt and grow, but there's still elements of us. And so yes, I think at one point, very extremely introverted, but I've learned how to grow and evolve to have conversations like this and build relationships and build trust, but still have my introverted times.
I'm the opposite, right? I've always been an extrovert. But I've always needed to figure out a way to focus that extroverted energy, right? Because again, I love to talk, and I'll get in front of a group of folks, but how do you control the conversation? How do you make sure it's always value add versus just being the guy who likes to talk a lot? And being from Louisiana, I naturally talk very quickly, and so how do you control that where you just don't turn people off? Because there's some individuals that you pour all the energy into them, that whoa, that's a whole lot. That's a whole lot. You use a lot of words, man. Use a lot of words.
Like the CEO that I was talking to this week, he's like, I don't care about all this.
All this extra touchy-feely stuff, yeah. So you just have to figure out what are your gifts, and then get in front of people that can help you refine that. Because regardless of how, we're all unique human beings. We all have different gifts and strengths. But there is somebody somewhere who has taken that journey before you, and you can get something from them. Even though I'm going to call you a reformed introvert. There are some things that I listen to you talk, and I listen to you say, like, how do you process your process? And it's like, and I've incorporated that into some of the things that I do. And it's one of those things, like, you can always learn things from people, but if you just stay in your bubble, or like some of these HR professionals that I shake my head at. And I say that like I'm not an HR professional. I am one as well. I'm a proud HR professional. But we've seen them. We've seen some HR professionals who are only in their office. They're only focused on paperwork. They're very focused on the very transactional things. And that's fine. You need folks like that. You can't have everybody out there on speaking engagements. Otherwise, work wouldn't get done. But everybody deserves to be able to grow and evolve as a professional. And you have to figure out where that path is for you. Some people, public speaking. Some people, subject matter experts. Some people are very technical in their role, but you can always learn from folks. And just find other like-minded people. I mean, LinkedIn, man. Again, LinkedIn should be paying us money at this point.
I know, and Good City.
And Good City should, we'll go in there and talk to them about it. They should, but LinkedIn is a great place. You know, you go out there and says, okay, I'm an introvert. I really don't want to get out there and talk to a whole bunch of people. Okay, I'm a payroll specialist, but I like what I do, and I just want to be awesome at it. Okay, there are so many payroll associations out there. And they are way smarter than I will ever be. But they have these talk groups and focus groups. They talk about new ways of looking at international payrolls and how to consolidate these processes. They're out there. They're out there. And if you're not out there engaging, you're just missing out. Yeah. And it's free. My God, it's free.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, like there's so many things that's out there that's free that we'll pay for some crazy shit in our lives. But some things that are the most value add are free, and we won't do it. We'll spend all of our hard-earned money on something. But if somebody says, here's a path to $1 million, all you got to do is read this book. And by the time you get to the end of this book, you will know how to make $1 million. And there's a number of people who will not freaking read that book. They won't take the advantage and go through that because there's effort, there's energy that has to be exerted versus me just cutting you a check. And same thing with opportunities and enhancing your network. It's free.
Yeah.
You just got to get out there and put just a little bit of energy into it. I don't know. It's a weird dichotomy with that.
It is.
For some people, like as a joke, my dad used to say, you know, if you really want to hide a secret, put it in a book. Just put it in a book.
Accurate.
Yeah, just put it in a book. No one's going to read it.
Even more so now.
Yeah. And listen, I'm not against, like I do audiobooks all the time. I just got through finish. As a matter of fact, this morning I finished a great book. So you heard the 1 Minute Manager. Blanchard wrote that. So he recently came out with another one called the new 1 Minute Manager. So he enhanced it for a more agile workforce. About 80% of the principles are still the same, but it talks about the need to have to manage people on a unique basis. He kind of goes into that. But I read that audiobook, and it was a great 45, 50-minute listen. And what I tend to do is I'll listen to an audiobook, and if there's value in it, I'll buy the book, and I'll listen to it again, and I'll highlight certain things. Some parts I might want to share with my team. Other parts will just be nuggets for myself. But audiobooks are a great way. You don't necessarily have to sit there and read a tome. You read your grandfather's tome of knowledge, but you can leverage technology, leverage Audible, listen to audiobooks, and you can digest it in a million different ways. But just to sit on your butt and not take advantage of the stuff that's out there to advance your expertise, there's no other word for it other than just lazy.
Lazy. That's it.
In the word of Google, where you can Google anything. Quick Googling what's going on with Diddy. quick Googling about what's happening in politics.
Yeah.
How about Google something that deals with, that can make you a better person or provide a better standard of living for you and your family, right? How about Googling something like that?
Get your own house in order first before you start worrying about politics.
Or just don't worry about politics at all.
Yeah. There's that.
You can. That too is an option, and just go out there and just blaze your own trail, man.
Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast.
It is. I know. It is.
We should create a podcast just for that.
Yeah. We need to start putting a list together. We'll just.
It'll be. I am an Android guy. Yes.
We'll put a list together.
All right.
And we'll start having coffee breaks. We can't go so long.
That's
next
okay.
time because we need to bring them together and then have specific.
Yeah, but it's just the problem with that is just when you and I get together.
Yeah, I know we just.
It's just a whole bunch of. It's just a whole bunch of stuff.
So much to unpack.
Yeah. So no, but this is good stuff. We need to continue to do that.
Always a pleasure.
Always, man. As always. We gotta shake hands and then we'll do coffee.
Then we'll do the coffee.
Coffee clink. There you go.
All right, everybody. Y'all have a good one.
Take care, guys.